Get out of the way. You're making this entire lobby smell like a dirty mop bucket." Vanessa cold-heartedly kicked her iced coffee. The brown liquid splashed everywhere, soaking the shoes of the elderly black man kneeling right next to it. She didn't even flinch. She just looked down at him the way you'd look at a crack in the sidewalk. A minor eyesore, easily forgotten. Clean it up. Some of us actually have real work to do. The old man stared at the puddle, then at her. Without blinking, he quietly replied, "Yes, ma'am, right away." He was 71 years old. His left knee had been held together by a steel rod since a nasty fall 14 years ago. Every single time he bent down, a sharp, bone-deep pain shot through his leg. Yet he still forced himself down. But the humiliation wasn't over. Kyle, a hotshot employee from the 4th floor, swaggered over and stood over the old man. He raised his voice, making sure the entire lobby could hear. "How much are they paying you anyway, old man?" 50 cents an hour. No wonder you're moving like you're underwater. Roars of laughter echoed through the marble halls, piercing, cold, and cruel. But what Kyle, Vanessa, or anyone else in this building didn't know was this. The man with the steel rod in his knee, the one they just humiliated, was the mysterious founder of this $3 billion financial empire. He owned the 19-story tower they worked in. His signature was on every single one of their paychecks. Within the next 48 hours, every single person who laughed today will learn his real name in the most bitter way imaginable. Their careers were officially over the second they opened their mouths. The old man's name was Walter. That's what the name tag on his gray uniform said. Walter. No last name. Just Walter. But the name stitched on the inside lining of the navy suit jacket, hanging in the private office on the 21st floor. The floor most employees didn't even know existed. That name was different. That name was on the bottom of every paycheck those laughing people had received since the first day they walked through those glass doors. Keanu Reeves, founder, chairman, sole majority shareholder of Reeves Capital Partners, LLC, headquartered at 4 Meridian Plaza, downtown Atlanta, Georgia. $3. $1 billion in assets under management. 41 years in business. Named one of the top 50 financial firms in the American South for 17 consecutive years. And they had no idea. Pay attention to one small detail. In the breast pocket of Keanu's gray janitor's uniform, folded into a perfect square, there is a photograph. It is not new. The edges are soft from being handled too many times. It shows a woman in a pale blue dress, standing in front of a small brick house, smiling wide, her hands full of grocery bags. She looks tired. She looks proud. That photograph is going to matter before this story ends. Before we go further, before the week that changed everything, we need to go back. Back to where this started. Not to the boardroom, not to the lobby. Back to a laundromat on Pryor Street in Atlanta, 1971. Ida Reeves was 33 years old. She worked 3 jobs. Mornings, she cleaned the offices of a law firm on Peachtree. Afternoons, she pressed linens at a hotel downtown. Nights, she took in ironing from the neighbors for $2 a pile. She never complained. She never explained herself to anyone who hadn't earned the right to ask. One afternoon, a partner at the law firm, a man named Henderson, soft hands, expensive shoes, walked past her while she was scrubbing the floor of the men's bathroom and said without breaking stride, "Make sure you get the grout this time. Last week was embarrassing." Ida did not look up. She kept scrubbing. Her son, Keanu, was 9 years old. He was waiting in the lobby, sitting on a wooden chair too big for him, feet dangling, watching through the glass partition. He saw everything. He did not fully understand what he had seen. But something locked into place in his chest that afternoon. Something that would not unlock for the next 42 years, and maybe never. Ida died in the winter of 1998. Congestive heart failure. She was 60 years old. At her bedside, she held Keanu's hand and said this, "Teddy, the only way a man knows what he's built is to go see it for himself. Don't let titles lie for you. Go and look with your own eyes." So every Monday morning for 11 years, Keanu Reeves put on a gray uniform. He signed in at the employee entrance. He took the service elevator. He pushed a cleaning cart down the halls of his own company. He listened. He watched. He memorized. Most of the 380 employees who worked at Reeves Capital Partners had never heard his name spoken out loud. They knew the name the way you know the name on a dollar bill. You don't think about it. You just spend it. 3 people knew the truth. The first was Gloria Marsh, his executive assistant of 19 years, a woman so composed she could deliver catastrophic news in the same tone she used to offer coffee. The second was Raymond Stokes, the head of night security, a former Army Ranger with a square jaw and a long memory. Raymond saluted Keanu every morning in the service corridor. Keanu saluted back. Neither of them ever mentioned it to anyone. The third was Edna Park, chair of the board, who called Keanu every Sunday evening and addressed him as Mr. Reeves and meant it every time. Now, hold on to that photograph in his pocket. Hold on to Raymond Stokes. Both of them are going to matter more than you think. The building was called Meridian Plaza. 21 floors of steel and glass, rising above Peachtree Center, with a lobby of white Georgia marble and a fountain that had run continuously since 1983. The kind of building where the water feature has a name, where the elevator buttons are brushed gold, where the word culture gets printed on laminated cards in the break room and nobody reads them. The 4th floor was sales and client relations. The 8th floor was portfolio management. The 12th floor was finance and human resources, which is where this particular story lives. And on the 12th floor, the name everyone knew was Vanessa Drummond. Vanessa was 28 years old. She had graduated from Emory at 22 with a 3.8, spent 3 years at a competing firm across town, and arrived at Reeves Capital 18 months ago like someone who had been saving up momentum and was finally ready to spend it. She dressed like she was always being photographed. She spoke in meetings the way people speak when they've practiced alone in their car. She had a talent for making suggestions that sounded collaborative and were actually orders. By the end of her first year, she had positioned herself as the informal team leader of the entire 12th floor, not because anyone had promoted her, because she had made herself unavoidable. Jason Mercer, 31, her closest ally, ran with her in the mornings before work and had the lean, hungry energy of someone who had learned early that agreeing with the right person is faster than being right yourself. Priya had noticed this about Jason 6 months ago and said nothing. She filed it away, the same way she filed away most things that made her uneasy at Reeves Capital. And then there was Sandra Howell, head of human resources, 41 years old, Columbia Law. The kind of woman who used the phrase best practices the way other people use the phrase I'm sorry, often and without much weight behind it. Sandra had been at the firm for 6 years. She ran her department the way a surgeon runs an operating room, controlled, precise, and deeply uncomfortable with anything she hadn't scheduled. Now, here is the part that very few people knew. For the past 5 months, Keanu had been quietly building something in the private office on the 21st floor. Not a new product, not a market strategy, something else entirely. A file, bank records, vendor contracts, wire transfers that didn't trace back to real companies. An IT consultant on retainer whose billing address was a UPS store in Buckhead. $3, $8 million, paid out over 22 months, to 3 entities that existed on paper and nowhere else. Someone inside Reeves Capital was stealing, and Keanu had every receipt. He had chosen this particular Monday, the 12th floor, for a reason. He had a feeling. After 11 years of walking the halls, He had learned to trust his feelings the way a doctor learns to trust an instinct before the test results confirm it. Monday morning, the lobby. Vanessa's iced coffee, the marble floor, the old man's shoes. That's where we came in. What happened next, Keanu did not anticipate. He should have, but he did not. By the time he reached the 6th floor on his Monday circuit, Vanessa had already posted the video. She hadn't filmed it herself. One of the junior analysts, a young man named Drew, who wore his ambition like cologne, had caught it on his phone from the security desk angle. Vanessa had reshared it to the internal company messaging platform with a single caption: "Lobby crew grinding slow today. Maintenance challenge." By noon, that post had been seen by 214 employees. By the time Keanu finished mopping the 8th floor kitchenette, there were 43 laughing reactions and 11 comments. Jason had written, "The dedication, truly inspiring," followed by 3 crying locking emojis. Priya had not commented. She had stared at the screen for a while. Then she had closed her laptop. Tuesday was when it escalated. Vanessa arrived at 7:40 and found Keanu already working on the 12th floor, wiping down the long counter beside the coffee station. She put down her bag. She looked at the freshly cleaned surface. She picked up the half-empty coffee pod tray and tilted it, not all the way, just enough, so that the wet grounds slid off the edge and landed in a heap on the clean counter. Then she looked at him. "Just looked," Keanu said. "I'll get that for you, ma'am." She said, "You should probably work faster. Management's been talking about efficiency around here." She walked away. Her heels on the tile made a sound like small appliances being tested. Jason was at the coffee machine and saw the whole thing. He grinned. He pulled out his phone and filmed it anyway, just the aftermath, just the old man cleaning up the mess, and sent it to Vanessa's phone with the message, "Content gold." But the worst thing happened at lunch. And here is where you need to understand something about rooms and crowds. A room can hold 30 people who would never individually do something cruel. But put them together, with someone confident enough to start, and the room changes, becomes a different kind of place. A place with its own logic, its own permission structure, its own sound. The 12th floor break room at noon on Tuesday had 26 people in it. Keanu came in pushing his cart to clean the microwave, which someone had left in a state that suggested they had never seen a microwave before. He started cleaning it. He had his back to most of the room. Vanessa was at the far end of the long table, eating a salad, talking to Jason. She looked up. She saw Keanu. She stood up. She did not raise her voice. That was the thing. She spoke conversationally, as if sharing something everyone in the room obviously already agreed with. "Has anyone actually timed how long it takes him to finish a single task? I'm genuinely asking. I clocked him on the lobby yesterday. It was either 11 minutes or I lost consciousness from boredom." Someone laughed. A nervous laugh, the kind that escapes before the brain has given permission. Then another. Then Jason stood up too and said, "I have a theory he's being paid by the hour, and he knows it." More laughter. And then, and this is the moment that matters, this is the moment that echoed, Vanessa looked directly at Keanu's back and said, loud enough for the whole room, "Can you pick it up a little? Some of us need to get back to work. You know, actual work." 26 people went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then someone started a slow clap. It wasn't organized. It wasn't planned. It just happened, the way a fire happens. Something catches, something else catches, and before you understand it, there is flame. Within 30 seconds, more than half the room was clapping in rhythm, slow and deliberate, while Keanu cleaned a microwave with his back to all of them. Keanu stopped. He set down the cloth. He turned around very slowly because of his knee. He looked at 26 faces. He did not look panicked. He did not look hurt. He looked the way a man looks when he is memorizing something he will need to recall later with absolute precision. He said, quietly, directly to Vanessa, "Does your mother know what you do with your lunch breaks?" The clapping stopped. Vanessa recovered in about 2 seconds flat, which told you everything about her. She laughed, loud and theatrical, the kind of laugh designed to pull a crowd back to your side. "My mother knows I make more in a month than you make in a year, old man. Don't worry about what I do with my time." Half the room made an ooh sound. The other half went very still. Keanu looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "More than you'd guess, miss. More than you'd guess." He picked up his cloth. He finished cleaning the microwave. He pushed his cart out of the room. In the doorway, Raymond Stokes stood in his security uniform. He had heard the clapping from down the hall. He had come to see. He stood very still in the doorway and watched for a long time, and when Keanu passed him on his way out, Raymond said nothing at all. He just took out his phone. He hit record. That footage was 3 minutes and 19 seconds long. Raymond emailed it to himself from a secure personal account and then deleted it from his phone. He had learned that specific sequence of steps in Kandahar province in 2004 and had never forgotten it. Wednesday was organized. Vanessa created a private channel on the internal Slack system called Operation Molasses. She invited 11 people by Wednesday morning, 24 by afternoon, 38 by the time the building's lights dimmed for evening. People were posting candid photos taken from across the open floor plan. Keanu at the water fountain. Keanu reading a note in the service stairwell during what passed for his break. Keanu eating a sandwich alone on a folding chair in the storage corridor on the 8th floor. The captions ranged from merely mean to something darker. Day 3. Still here. Still suffering. And someone confirm his retirement wasn't like 15 years ago. And the one that Priya screenshotted and then put her phone face down on her desk and didn't pick it up again for 40 minutes. He moves like a man who knows his clock ran out and just forgot to stop. Priya had been at Reeves Capital for 4 years. She had a good eye for what was happening in a room, which was both a gift and a burden. She sat in the open plan between the channel on her screen and the actual hallway where the actual man walked, and she felt something she couldn't name settle on her like a coat that was too heavy. She thought about saying something. She even typed a message, just 2 lines, just saying, "Hey, this has gone too far." And then she looked at Jason across the floor, who was laughing at his screen, and she thought about her performance review in 6 weeks, and she pressed delete. She pressed delete, and she hated herself for it, and she pressed delete anyway. Thursday was the cake. Vanessa ordered it from a bakery on Buckhead Avenue. She had it delivered to the 12th floor break room at 10 in the morning. A white sheet cake with pale yellow frosting and letters written in chocolate icing that read, "Congratulations on your retirement, old timer. It's about time." Confetti-shaped sprinkles on the sides. A little plastic figure of an old man with a cane pressed into the center. Keanu was wiping down the windows in the corner office when Sandra Howell walked past the break room, saw the cake, stopped, looked at it, looked at the 3 people standing around laughing, and kept walking. She did not say stop. She did not say anything. She went back to her desk, pulled up a termination template she had modified 3 weeks ago, added 1 line about consistent performance deficiencies and inadequate output metrics, and saved it to the HR drive under the file name, Nash W Termination Draft Final. The name on the template was not Keanu, it was Walter, because that's all she knew him as. She had been building this file for 2 weeks, ever since Vanessa had come to her office and sat down and explained, very reasonably and professionally, that the maintenance vendor contract was coming up for renewal, and this might be a good opportunity to evaluate whether individual contractors on the team were meeting baseline expectations. Sandra had listened and nodded, and understood perfectly what was actually being said. She had seen it many times before. She knew how to write a performance file that looked legitimate. She had done it 8 times in the past 2 years, always for employees above 55. Always after a very reasonable, very professional conversation with someone like Vanessa. She had told herself each time that the documentation was real, that the concerns were legitimate, that she was just doing her job. She had told herself this enough times that she now believed it without effort. Friday was payday. This is the part nobody on the 12th floor saw coming. And if you've been waiting, if part of you has been tightening through all of this, thinking, okay, when does it turn? When does the floor give way? This is when. Keanu arrived at the building at 5 in the morning, the way he always did. The service entrance. The cleaning cart. Raymond Stokes was finishing his overnight shift. He held the door. Mr. Reeves. Raymond said it very quietly. He hadn't said that name out loud in 4 years. I know, Keanu said, after today. Raymond held the door open and stood very straight. Keanu did his rounds. Lobby, first. He mopped the marble where Vanessa's iced coffee had landed 4 days earlier. He wiped the brass handles on the front doors. He emptied the bins near the elevator banks. To anyone watching the security feed, and someone was always watching the security feed, it looked like every other morning of the last 11 years. Up on the 12th floor, the mood was electric in the specific way that a crowd gets electric when they think they're about to watch something happen to someone else. The termination meeting was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. Conference room HR 3. Vanessa had brought in a box of macarons from a place on Peachtree. Jason had a bottle of Prosecco in his desk drawer, still cold from the mini-fridge he'd bought with his first bonus. Sandra had walked past Vanessa's cubicle 4 times already, giving a small, satisfied nod each time. The nod of a woman who has organized something cleanly and expects it to stay organized. At 11:47 in the morning, 2 things happened that none of them noticed. The first was that Gloria Marsh, sitting at her desk on the 21st floor, opened the company's internal calendar system and moved the 3 o'clock meeting. She changed the location from conference room HR 3 on the 12th floor to the executive strategy suite on the 21st floor. She did not send a notification. She simply changed the location field and clicked save. The second was Gloria picked up the phone and called the accounting department and said, in her perfectly modulated voice, "Hi, Linda. This is Gloria from the chairman's office. Mr. Hargrove has asked that physical paychecks be brought up to the strategy suite for this afternoon's all-hands review." All of them, yes. The full batch. Thank you. The name she had used, Mr. Hargrove, belonged to the acting COO, a man who was currently in Nashville at a conference and had no idea what was happening in his name. By 12:45, 380 white envelopes were stacked in neat rows on the long walnut table of the executive strategy suite on the 21st floor. Each envelope had a name printed on the front. Each contained a paper paycheck. Each paycheck had a signature line at the bottom right corner. Blank. Waiting. At 1:15, Sandra Howell got a calendar notification on her phone, showing that the 3 o'clock meeting had been moved to the 21st floor. She frowned. She called Gloria. "The meeting location for this afternoon's review. Why is it moved to 21? Gloria said. "Mr. Hargrove asked for the strategy suite. He wants to handle the exit paperwork directly." Sandra hesitated. It was strange. Hargrove never involved himself in maintenance contractor terminations. He barely showed up for senior staff exits. But Gloria was the chairman's office, and Gloria was never wrong about scheduling. "Fine," Sandra said. "We'll be up there." She hung up and felt something small and uncomfortable move through her, the kind of physical sensation that arrives before the brain has processed the reason. She smoothed it over, filed it away. She was good at that. At 2:40, Keanu rolled his cleaning cart to the service elevator on the first floor. He pressed 21. The doors closed. When they opened, was waiting in the corridor. She was holding a garment bag. Mr. Reeves. She said his name the way she always said it. With weight, Gloria. He said hers the same way. They walked together to his private office, the one at the end of the hall, with his name on the door in small brass letters that no one from the lower floors had ever stood close enough to read. Inside, on the desk, was a fountain pen, silver, heavy. He had used it to sign every paycheck the company had ever issued. He took off the gray uniform shirt. He took off the janitor's gloves. Gloria helped him into a dark charcoal suit, white shirt, cufflinks. She smoothed the lapels. She stepped back. In the breast pocket of the suit, Keanu placed the photograph, the woman in the pale blue dress. The grocery bags, the proud smile. He had carried it every single Monday for 11 years. He picked up the silver pen. Gloria said, "They're all in the suite, sir. Edna, the auditors, outside counsel." The 2 agents from the field office arrived through the freight entrance 20 minutes ago. And the paychecks on the table. All 380. He took a long breath. He uncapped the pen. Then let's go. The executive strategy suite on the 21st floor had floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over downtown Atlanta, over the tops of the live oaks, over the curve of the highway headed south. The walls held framed magazine covers, Business Atlanta, Forbes, Black Enterprise, each one featuring the same man at different ages, each one folded into a corner of the room that visitors rarely looked closely at. At 2:58, Keanu sat down at the head of the walnut table. In front of him, 380 white envelopes stacked. Beside them, the silver pen. Around the table, Edna Park in a charcoal blazer, 2 forensic auditors from a New York firm, Reeves Capital's outside general counsel, a woman named Patricia Osei who had a reputation in Atlanta legal circles that preceded her into every room, 3 board members, Gloria taking notes on a yellow legal pad, and in the corner near the window, 2 agents from the FBI's Atlanta field office, sitting very still, in plain suits, with the quiet, patient look of people who do not need to announce themselves. Keanu pulled the first envelope toward him. He opened it, drew out the check, and signed his name in slow, clear cursive at the bottom right corner. Keanu Reeves. He set that check aside, took the next one, Keanu Reeves. At 3 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Sandra Howell walked in first. She was holding a manila folder labeled Reeves, W, termination. She had typed that label herself at 9 this morning, and there had been something satisfying about it, the crisp efficiency of it. Behind her came Marcus Webb, the acting VP of sales, who had been looped in by Vanessa and had showed up because he was the kind of person who liked to be present when things happened. Behind Marcus came Vanessa Drummond, who had insisted on attending because she wanted to see it. Her phone was already in her hand. All 3 of them stopped. They saw the table. They saw the envelopes. They saw the people sitting around the room. The auditors with their laptops, the attorneys in their suits, the 2 very still people in the corner who did not look like they worked in finance. And at the head of the table, in a perfectly fitted dark charcoal suit, they saw the old black man who cleaned their floors, calmly signing checks with a silver fountain pen. He did not look up. The only sound in the room was the pen on paper. Vanessa's phone lowered slowly to her side. She had not told her hand to do that. It just happened. Edna Park stood up. She did not clear her throat. She did not raise her voice. "For those of you who haven't had the pleasure," she said, "allow me to introduce Mr. Keanu Reeves, founder, chairman, and sole majority shareholder of Reeves Capital Partners. The man whose signature has appeared on the bottom of every paycheck you have received since the first day you walked into this building." The silence that followed was not a pause. It was a complete cessation. like a power outage, like every sound in the room had been cut at the source. Sandra's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. The manila folder in her hand began to tremble. Not shake, tremble. The fine, specific trembling of a person whose body has understood something that the mind is still catching up to. Marcus went gray. The particular shade of gray that arrives when the blood has quietly left the face, in response to a calculation the brain has just completed. Vanessa grabbed the back of the nearest chair with both hands. She did not fall, but her knees did something involuntary, a slow, unstoppable bending. And she held the chair, and her mouth worked without making sound, and her eyes were fixed on the silver pen in his hand, and the stack of envelopes, and the brass letters on the door at the end of the hall, that she had walked past 100 times and never read closely enough. "Oh my God," she whispered it. "Oh my God." One of the auditors gently pushed a glass of water across the table toward her. She didn't see it. Keanu signed 3 more checks. He set the pen down. He capped it. He folded his hands on the table and looked up for the first time. "Please," he said, "sit down. We have a performance review to conduct, just not the one any of you scheduled." Sandra found her voice first. She always found it first. It came out high and fast. "Mr. Reeves, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. The documentation I prepared was entirely procedural. Company policy requires that I—" Keanu raised one hand. Not abruptly, not aggressively. He simply raised it, palm out, and Sandra's voice stopped as if the switch had been cut. Marcus tried next. He put on the smile he wore at client dinners, the one that worked in rooms where people didn't know him well. "Keanu, wow, I've actually been meaning to get a meeting on the calendar with you for. Sit down." Keanu said it the way you say it when you've said it 1,000 times to 1,000 different people, and know exactly how it lands. 2 words, full stop. Marcus sat. Vanessa was still gripping the chair. Patricia Osi stood behind her and said, quietly, "You should sit, miss." Drummond. Vanessa sat. She sat and stared at the silver pen, and then her hands went to her face and she began to cry. Not performatively, not strategically. The kind of crying that arrives before you've decided whether to let it. Keanu let her. He waited. Then he reached for a tablet on the table, tapped it once, and the large screen on the wall behind him came to life. The footage was clear. A wide-angle view of the break room on the 12th floor at noon on Tuesday. The long table. The 26 people. The clapping. The rhythm. The old man cleaning the microwave with his back to all of them, and Vanessa, standing on a chair at the end of the room leading the rhythm like a conductor who had mistaken cruelty for wit. The sound filled the suite. The slow clapping filled the suite. The chanting, the specific words, the specific rhythm, filled the suite and bounced off the floor-to-ceiling windows and went nowhere. Nobody at the table moved. Not the auditors, not the attorneys, not the board members. Nobody. Keanu let it play to the end. 3 minutes and 19 seconds. Then he turned off the screen. "I am not showing you this to humiliate you, Miss Drummond," he said. His voice had not changed. He said it the same way he had said every other sentence. "I am showing it because in a few minutes I am going to ask you a question, and how you answer it will determine what your next 5 years look like." He turned then and looked at the row of magazine covers on the wall. He pointed at one. Business Atlanta, 1983. A young black man in his early 30s, standing in front of a building that was still under construction, hard hat in hand, smiling the way people smile when they have done something that took longer than it should have. "That is me," he said. "Age 31. I built this firm 1 year after my mother died." Mother was a cleaning woman in downtown Atlanta. She was treated every day of her working life the way the 3 of you treated me this week. I built Reeves Capital Partners so that would not happen here. And for 30 years, mostly, it did not. The room was so still you could hear the HVAC system thinking. Once a week for 30 years, he said, I have walked the floors of my own company in a janitor's uniform. Because titles lie, paychecks lie, position and salary and job description, all of it lies. But how a person treats someone who can do nothing for them, a stranger with a mop, a maintenance man, someone invisible by design, that is the only honest report card a leader will ever receive. He turned to Marcus. He picked up a leather folder from beside him and slid it across the walnut table. It stopped in front of Marcus with the precision of something that had been practiced, or perhaps just inevitable. Open it. Marcus did not open it. His hands stayed flat on the table. Keanu opened it for him. 3 pages, wire transfer records, vendor contracts. A shell company called Ridgemont Advisory Solutions, incorporated in Delaware, to a P.O. box that forwarded mail to Marcus's brother's home address in Marietta. 11 months of payments. $8 million. Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked at the pages. He looked at Keanu. He looked at the 2 people in the corner who had not moved. The senior agent stood up. She was a compact woman with short silver hair and the kind of stillness that comes from years of sitting in rooms just like this one. Mr. Webb, she said, please stand and place your hands behind your back. Marcus stood. He looked once more at Keanu, the kind of look that contains an entire argument that has no words left in it. And then he looked at the floor. The agent read him his rights in a calm, clear voice. The second agent produced the handcuffs. The click of them was very loud. Take him out the freight elevator, Edna Park said quietly. We don't need a production. The agents walked him out. The door closed. The room breathed again. Keanu turned to Sandra. Miss Howell, he says, what is about to happen to you is not because you tried to terminate a janitor who turned out to be the founder. I am not so fragile that a termination memo offends me. He slid a separate folder across the table. What is happening to you is because of these names. Sandra opened it. Inside were 11 personnel files, each one a former Reeves Capital employee, each one over the age of 57. Each one terminated in the past 26 months, with performance documentation that had been created within 30 days of the exit date, after years of clean annual reviews. Thomas Waverly, 21 years of service. June Okoro, 18 years. Dennis Callahan, 16 years. The list went on. Every one of those terminations passed through your desk, Keanu said. Everyone was signed by you. And in every case, the performance documentation was manufactured to justify a decision that had already been made. Sandra opened her mouth. The auditors flagged the pattern 9 months ago, he said. The age clustering was statistically impossible as coincidence. I have been waiting to see how far you would take it. He paused. You tried to take it to 11. Sandra's voice came out in pieces. The documentation was, the concerns were legitimate. HR policy requires. They were not legitimate. He said it without heat. You were executing a benefits reduction strategy through wrongful termination. You used the HR department of my firm as a tool to push 11 human beings out the door. People who had given this company, collectively, 193 years of service. Sandra put both hands flat on the table. She looked at the folder. She could not look at the people around it. Patricia Osei slid a single sheet across to her. This is your termination letter, Ms. Howell. Effective immediately. For cause. Severance is withheld pending a class action suit that 11 of your former colleagues have already agreed to participate in. The firm is providing them legal support. Your HR certification is being formally reviewed by the Georgia Slicing Board. I would strongly suggest retaining personal counsel before you leave this building. Sandra pressed her hands harder against the table. She did not look up. Keanu turned to Vanessa. Vanessa had not stopped crying. Her mascara had made 2 thin black tracks down her face. She looked younger than 28. She looked like a person who had just discovered that the ground they were standing on was made of something far less solid than they'd assumed. "Ms. Drummond," he said, "how old are you?" 28. Her voice barely made it across the table. My mother was 28 when she had me. She cleaned law offices on Peachtree 6 mornings a week. She came home with her knees swollen and her back at an angle she could never quite straighten out again. She wore a uniform very similar to the one you watched me wear this week. Vanessa shook her head. She was shaking it the way you shake it when there is nothing to say. "When you looked at me," Keanu said, "what did you think my life was?" Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. There was no answer. There was no answer. She understood with the specific clarity of someone who has just been handed a mirror at the worst possible moment that there had been no answer because she had never asked the question. She had not thought about his life at all. That was the answer. "That silence is the honest reply," Keanu said. "That is what I need you to sit with, not the fear of what happens next. The fact that you looked at a human being and saw a problem to manage. You organized 26 people to humiliate one man on his lunch break. You turned it into content. You turned his presence into a punchline. He let it sit in the room. You have 2 choices," he said. "The first is termination today, for cause, with no reference. Your name will be known in this industry in a way that follows you. You are 28. That is a long time for something to follow you." Vanessa pressed her lips together. She was listening. "The second," he said, "is a structured accountability program. You keep your position at your current salary, but for the next 6 months, you will spend 20 hours a week working with a community organization I will designate. An organization that serves elderly residents in this city. You will not observe. You will work. At the end of those 6 months, you will record a public acknowledgement video on your own platform, in your own words, naming what you did and why it was wrong. Unscripted, unedited, and the board will evaluate your continued employment at the conclusion of that period." Vanessa did not need a moment. "I'll do it." Her voice was broken but clear. "Whatever it requires, please." Keanu looked at her for a long time. The way you look at something you're not sure about yet. Not hostile. Waiting. "Go home, Ms. Drummond," he said. "Take the rest of today. The work starts Monday." She stood. She was unsteady. She made it to the door, and then she stopped. She turned around. She walked back to the table. She stood in front of him, and she said, "Mr. Reeves. I don't have words for this. I am so sorry." He looked at her. "I know you are," he said. "The work begins now. That's the only thing that matters." She left. He picked up the silver pen. He pulled the next envelope. He signed his name, Keanu Reeves. He worked through the remaining envelopes in silence. When he was finished, he slid the entire stack to Gloria. "Make sure everyone gets paid on time. It's Friday." "Yes, sir." She gathered them and carried them out. Raymond Stokes was standing in the corridor when the FBI agents walked Marcus Webb to the freight elevator. Raymond watched without expression. When the doors closed, he came back to his post. He stood the same way he'd stood every morning in the service corridor for 7 years, and he let out a breath that had been 7 years in the making. The following Monday, Keanu stood at a podium in the main atrium of Meridian Plaza. All 380 employees were present or watching live from their screens. He had brought no notes. "My name is Keanu Reeves," he said. "I am the founder and chairman of this company. Some of you have known me as the man who cleaned your floors. Some of you have known me as the name on the bottom of your paycheck. From today, you know me as both." The atrium was the kind of quiet that doesn't happen in buildings with 380 people unless something has fundamentally shifted. "I'm not telling you this to frighten you," he said. "I'm telling you because a company that treats its maintenance staff differently than it treats its managing directors is not a company I choose to own. And it should not be a company you choose to work for." He turned to the screen behind him. "I want to show you something. Most of you have not seen this." The footage played. 3 minutes and 19 seconds of it. The break room. The clapping. The chanting. The old man with his back to the room. The atrium heard it in complete silence. 379 people heard 26 of their colleagues doing something that could not be explained away or softened in retrospect. Several of them looked at the floor. A woman in the back put her hand over her mouth. A man near the pillar on the left side closed his eyes. When it ended, Keanu looked out across the crowd. "I counted 26 faces in that room," he said. "I remember every one of them. I am not going to terminate any of you. That is not what this moment is for. This moment is for something harder than termination. This moment is for truth." He announced the changes effective that week. An independent ethics line reporting directly to the board, not to HR. Mandatory dignity and inclusion training with outside facilitators who had no relationship to the existing culture. And what he called the groundwork program. Every vice president and above, including himself, would spend 2 full business days annually working alongside the maintenance team, the security team, the front desk staff, not supervising, working. "If you are not willing to do the work," he said, "you are not fit to lead the people who do it." He paused. "Finally, every termination of every employee above the age of 55 over the past 3 years will be reviewed by an independent panel. Where wrongdoing is found, those former employees will be offered reinstatement, back pay, and a direct apology from this firm. Several of them are watching this broadcast right now. To you," he said, looking at the camera, "I am sorry. We failed you. We will make it right." In a house in Decatur, Georgia, Thomas Waverly sat at his kitchen table watching on his laptop. He had been retired involuntarily for 14 months. He had not told his wife the full story of how it had happened. He watched the screen and he put his hand flat over his mouth, and he did not move for a long time. 3 months passed. Reeves Capital Partners stock, which had dipped briefly in the days after Marcus Webb's arrest, climbed 18% by the end of the quarter. 2 of the firm's largest institutional investors contacted Edna Park personally. The Wall Street Journal ran a piece titled "The Invisible Audit: How One Founder Walked the Floor for a Decade and What He Found." It was shared more than 40,000 times in the first week. Marcus Webb pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering in federal court. Keanu attended the hearing. He sat near the back. He listened as the U.S. attorney read the charges in a flat, procedural voice. He listened as Marcus's attorney spoke about remorse and rehabilitation. He listened as the judge issued the sentence. 72 months in federal prison, $3. $8 million in restitution. A lifetime bar from working in financial services anywhere in the United States. When the marshals walked Marcus out, Marcus looked back. He found Keanu in the back row. He held the look for a moment. Keanu did not look away. He did not look triumphant. He did not look satisfied. He looked the way a person looks when they have seen something they would rather not have had to see, and they are not pretending otherwise. Marcus looked down at the floor. He kept looking at the floor until he was out the door. Sandra Howell's class action settlement was reached 4 months later. $2. $1 million. Every dollar went to the 11 former employees. Thomas Waverly used his share to clear a debt that had been accumulating interest for 20 months. June Okoro put hers toward her daughter's college fund. Dennis Callahan took his grandchildren somewhere warm for the first time in 3 years. Sandra's HR certification was revoked. She was listed on a private professional reference network maintained by HR executives across the Southeast. She eventually relocated and found work in an administrative support role that had no personnel authority. She spent a long time alone with what she had done. That part did not resolve quickly. Vanessa Drummond finished her 6 months at the West Side Senior Enrichment Center in Atlanta. She showed up every Tuesday and Thursday evening, without fail, for 24 consecutive weeks. She read aloud to an 88-year-old retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Cornelius, who had grown up in Alabama and liked to talk about the history of public gardens. She served dinner. She pushed a wheelchair through a garden path twice a week for a man named Mr. Franklin, who had been a jazz trumpeter in the 60s and remembered every song he'd ever played and wanted someone to listen while he named them. She sat with a woman named Ruth, who had no living relatives and was afraid of the dark and needed someone to be there when the lights went down in her room. She did not tell anyone at work what she was doing. The director of the center wrote a letter to Reeves Capital's board at the end of those 6 months. Vanessa did not know about the letter. The director sent it without telling her. In 29 years of managing this facility, the director wrote, "I have rarely seen a young person change as openly and as genuinely as Miss Drummond has. I did not tell her I was writing this. I simply thought someone should know." When Vanessa returned, she did not go back to the 12th floor. She walked into Keanu's office on a Monday morning, sat across from him, and asked to be reassigned to the facilities operations team. She wanted to work alongside the maintenance staff. Keanu looked at her for a long time. "Are you sure?"
Yes, sir.
"I'm sure." He approved it. She spent 14 months on that team. She learned every name. She learned the schedule, the routes, the supply chain, the specific way the south stairwell always leaked after heavy rain, and the specific way the request to fix it kept getting deprioritized by a building management contract that nobody on the executive floor had read carefully enough. She fixed the contract. Keanu never mentioned it. He let her write her own ending. Raymond Stokes was called into Keanu's office 4 days after the 21st floor meeting. "Raymond, sit down."
Sir, you saw me every morning for 7 years when no one else did.
"You saluted me at 5 in the morning in a service corridor while everyone above you was asleep. Tell me why." Raymond was quiet for a moment. "I served, sir, you served. That's the only reason." Keanu slid a folder across the desk. "Effective next Monday, you are Director of Building Operations and Security. You will report directly to me. The compensation is in the folder. Take a day." Raymond opened the folder. He looked at the number. He looked up. "I don't need a day, Mr. Reeves." In November, the Ida Reeves Foundation was established with an initial endowment of $2 million. Scholarships, 30 in the first year, one for each year the company had been in operation, open to the children of maintenance workers, hotel housekeepers, food service employees, and janitorial staff anywhere in the state of Georgia. At the dedication ceremony, Keanu read the last letter his mother had written to him. He had not read it publicly before. He had not planned to read all of it. He got through most of it before his voice changed in the way that voices change when they are carrying something heavier than words. When he stepped back from the podium, the room stood. A reporter caught him near the exit afterward. "Mr. Reeves, do you regret not revealing yourself earlier? You could have stopped what happened in that break room before it went as far as it did." Keanu paused. He looked at the reporter. He thought about the question for what felt like a real amount of time. "I regret," he said slowly, "that it was necessary at all. But I do not regret knowing the truth. A comfortable lie is still a lie. I chose the truth." He walked out into the afternoon light. The live oaks on Peachtree cast long shadows across the sidewalk. He walked through them without hurrying. 6 months after the reveal, on a Monday morning, Keanu put the gray uniform back on. He signed in at the service entrance. He took the elevator to the 9th floor, operations and compliance, and he pushed his cart out into the corridor just before 6. The first employee to see him was a young woman, a second-year analyst, who stopped and set her coffee down and walked over. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves. Good morning. Call me Keanu. She smiled. She went to her desk. By 8 in the morning, everyone on the 9th floor had come by. Not to gawk, just to say good morning. Some of them had been in the atrium that day. Some had not. None of them looked through him. None of them walked past. Around 10, a young man, new hire, maybe 22, first full week, came around the corner carrying a heavy box of paper for the printer. He stopped when he saw Keanu hauling a full trash bag toward the service door. Sir, that looks heavy. Let me grab one end. He had no idea who Keanu was. He was offering because the bag was heavy and a person was carrying it. Keanu stopped. He looked at the young man, and he smiled the kind of smile that takes over the whole face and doesn't apologize for it. Son, he said, you are going to do just fine here. On that very Friday afternoon, a paycheck arrived on the desk of Thomas Waverly. Reinstated to his position in portfolio analytics, this was his first check back. He broke open the envelope, his eyes drifting down to the bottom right corner. For a long time, he just sat there at his desk. He wasn't crying. He was simply sitting with it, the way you sit with something precious after a lifetime away. Keanu Reeves, that name, right there on his check, as if it had always belonged there. Down in the main lobby, mounted on the white Georgia marble wall right beside the front entrance, two frames now hung side by side. The first held a magazine cover from 1983. A young man in his 30s clutching a hard hat, smiling in front of a building still under construction. The second was a photograph of a woman in a pale blue dress, her arms full of grocery bags, her eyes tired yet fierce with pride and light. Beneath them, rendered in small, elegant engravings, Ida Reeves, 1938-1998. She raised a man who remembered, a reflection on human connection and deeper truths. While the story draws to a close, it opens up a profound space to reflect on what truly matters in our modern world. The first, and perhaps most piercing, lesson is reverence for the invisible. In a society that constantly races after the glitz and glamour, it is tragically easy to measure a person by the clothes they wear, the title they hold, or the money they make. We so easily forget that every soul carries a lifetime of hidden scars and quiet sacrifices. That elderly man, kneeling on a cold floor with a steel plate in his knee, is the very definition of resilience and quiet dignity, noble virtues that can never be cheapened by the pocket change of someone else's contempt. Moreover, this narrative serves as a stark wake-up call about empathy and human decency. The callous entitlement of the world's Vanessas and Kyles represents a growing cultural numbness, a mindset that centers entirely on self-interest while trampling over the vulnerable. Yet, life has a way of turning the wheels of justice in silence. The sudden appearance of Keanu Reeves' name on that paycheck isn't just a fairy tale rescue. It is a testament to an eternal truth. True kindness watches from the shadows and acts when it counts. True humanity doesn't live in grand, sweeping declarations. It lives in the quiet defense of the weak and the restoration of dignity to those who have been wronged. Ultimately, the tribute engraved beneath the mother's portrait cuts to the very root of who we are. It reminds us of the profound legacy of family and the weight of gratitude. A man is not made great by his wealth, but by his capacity to remember, to honor his past, and to look at a working man's sweat with deep compassion, because he still sees the reflection of his own hard-working mother. It is a stirring reminder to look closer at the invisible things around us, for more often than not, the things unseen are the very pillars holding up our world. If this story spoke to you, not simply because of how it ended, but because you recognized a piece of yourself in it, a room you've stood in, a silence you've kept, or a soul you've walked past without truly seeing, please give it a like. It takes only a second, but it helps put this message exactly where it needs to go. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that invisible does not mean unimportant. And leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever stood in a room like that one? Which side of the room were you on? I read every single response.